we are joined by the one and only. He is the man, the myth, the legend, NBA insider Brandon Scoopy Robinson, who the last time I checked, I believe it was July 2nd or July 3rd, you had by the way, the Lakers, they won Russell Westbrook, and it took about a month, but the trade is going to happen, it looks like. How you doing, my friend?
I'm wonderful. Sources say the trade is going to happen. Always good to talk to you. Russell Westbrook, as first reported by Adrian Wojnarowski, the Lakers are looking to move Montrezl Harrell, as well as Kyle Kuzma, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and I believe the 2021 or 2022 NBA draft pick in exchange for Russell Westbrook, who I will share. Really and truly, those requests or the official request for a trade was something that he was mulling over since round one of the NBA playoffs. And he officially did make that trade request today. And he will join Anthony Davis and one in LeBron James with the Los Angeles Lakers. And they're looking for a championship right now.
And from what I understand, part of what had to make this deal work was Montrezl Harrell had to opt in. Right, to make this work financially and player-wise. So I think that's an interesting wrinkle. This is more than just Westbrook going to L.A. This is other guys saying, I will opt in to make this trade happen.
For sure, and I'll add this. When you look at the Lakers' whole overall outlook, there were a few things that they were considering. And as I've mentioned on previous shows, I've been on a ton of shows, so I'm not sure if I said it on this show, but Talen Horton-Tucker was another player of contention contractually who is a restricted free agent. So he's opting in as well. I know that at some point the conversation with the Washington Wizards was one, and whether Talen Horton-Tucker would be included in the deal along with Kyle Kuzma as well as Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Caldwell-Pope will be part of the trade, so he'll be headed out to Washington. But there were some things that needed to be sorted out, and whether or not Montrez was going to opt in. And I've heard from some folks out in LA that Montrezl Harrell did not necessarily get along with head coach Frank Vogel, and really he had some issues with Frank's rotation, and that was a point of contention. But Montrez is a client of Rich Paul, as well as LeBron, as well as Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, as well as Anthony Davis. It's a clutch family in Los Angeles with the purple and gold, but ultimately he'll be able to spread his wings some. I think the Wizards are in a good position now, because I know we talk about the Lakers, but we're not really focusing on the Wizards. Bradley Beal has the help that he was looking for. And I said this earlier to Ryan Hollins on Instagram Live. This was always Bradley Beal's team. The Pelicans were interested at some point, but Bradley Beal has said all of the right things. And they competed in round one of the NBA playoffs against the Philadelphia 76ers. You got Montrezl Harrell, you got Kyle Kuzma. In my mind, when you look at anybody like Kyle Kuzma, like Jordan Clarkson and Brandon Ingram, whenever they go to a new destination, they flourish. And you saw Jordan Clarkson, get awarded with Sixth Man of the Year award. And so I'm looking forward to a fresh start for Kyle Kuzma.
What's also interesting is I saw a report that apparently Bradley Beal is okay with this. He likes that they brought in all these players, and he's not looking to be out of town either. So part of me has to wonder, you and I have always talked about the relationships that players have around the league. You mentioned Harold maybe thinking along with Vogel. Well, you have to think, Washington has a new head coach, right? You have a situation where these players, maybe Beal is friendly with some of these guys off the court. Maybe there is something more here than just Westbrook being traded for X players. Maybe there are other things here as well.
Well, I'll add this. Wes Unseld Jr., former Denver Nuggets assistant coach under Mike Malone in Denver. I'll tell this to you straight up. He is not only beloved in Washington because of his dad, but also I'll say that there were discussions as Sam Cassell, who's been a lifelong assistant coach in the NBA. Bradley Beal has a relationship with Sam, and I know that there was conversation about whether he would be, in the assistant coaching staff. I know he's still under contract with the Philadelphia 76ers under Doc Rivers, but I believe that when you look at just the fact that there's a brand new coach and Unseld, and he's able to pull this off before day one. I think that's phenomenal. They have Daniel Gafford, who I got to know during his time in Chicago with the Bulls, out in Washington, living his best life, and you saw him get real tough against Joel Embiid at times during the playoffs. Now he has some help with Montrez if he stays. And you have added pieces. Like you legitimately have two NBA champions and Kyle Kuzma and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That's I don't know if the word is unusual, but it's an asset because this is what Beal wanted as it related to enforcers, if you will. And the Wizards get that. So as much as folks talk about Russell Westbrook, I really like this move for the future with the Washington Wizards.
Brendan Scoop B. Robinson, NBA insider over at Bally Sports, joins us right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at Scoop B on Twitter. He's joining us as we are counting down basically a couple hours less to the NBA draft getting underway tonight. And before we get there, there is movement aplenty. And I got to ask you about the other move that's already happened. Is the Ricky Rubio trade to Cleveland, Minnesota opening up cap space to do something?
Yes.
Okay, next question. The reason I ask is because we know that Minnesota has said the report is they desperately want Ben Simmons, right? Mm-hmm. Well, whether it's Ben Simmons or somebody else, you don't trade Ricky Rubio if you don't have another piece potentially waiting to fall into place. And we know that there's a lot of rumors out there where Ben Simmons could go. I feel like at this point, I'm up to 12 teams, I feel like at this point, who have called about Ben Simmons. So, do you think Ben Simmons gets traded tonight, or do you think it makes more sense for Daryl Morey to keep waiting out the market?
I'm picking my words more and more these days. But what I will say to you is I'm not sure. That's my answer. The next
That's fine.
Hours. But what I will say to you is that I think it was brilliant for the Minnesota Timberwolves to move Ricky Rubio to the Cleveland Cavaliers heading into tonight's NBA draft at Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York, USA. But what I will say to you is that Minnesota was always a dark horse of a team looking to get Ben Simmons. And I use this analogy often. I've always looked at Ben Simmons in the same light that I looked at Vince Carter when he was in Toronto. I feel like a lot of people just in Toronto live, breathe, eat, sleep, and what have you. This is a family show as it relates to Ben Simmons, but in Toronto, rather. So let me start from the beginning. In Toronto, people liked Vince Carter because he was the star of the show. In Philadelphia, he was the star of the show, meaning Ben Simmons, except Joel Embiid was really the star. I think that if he goes to Minnesota, playing alongside somebody like Karl Towns, if they're able to pull it off, I think would be great because Karl and Minnesota have a mutual respect for one another from everything that I know in my intel wheelhouse. So if they're able to pull it off, the Timberwolves were always a dark horse team to potentially acquire Ben Simmons. I know that Philadelphia and Golden State have been talking all this week, and it was a conversation as it relates to exchanging picks and movement. Number 4 pick, number 7 pick. I know that Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer reported today that that trade request was rejected. So I do think Minnesota is a dark horse. I still think it comes down to Toronto. I still think it comes down to Golden State. I still think that it comes down to the Minnesota Timberwolves. But if you're the Timberwolves, you'd have to give up D'Angelo Russell potentially in order to make that happen. So they're clearing cap space, but there are some other pieces that have to be accounted for.
It's been suggested by a lot of people, and I don't think this is a bad opinion to have because it's just an opinion. But the opinion is out there that it would make more sense to trade Ben Simmons on draft night because you can move around picks than waiting for free agency. Do you buy into that?
Yes, because to be honest with you, if you know me and you know my reporting, people are still getting familiar with my reporting and who I am. And so if you go back to my tweets and my reporting and my podcast with Rashad Phillips, this is a revisit of a conversation that Toronto, Golden State, and Philadelphia have had since last year, and it revolved around LaMelo Ball and the Toronto Raptors coveting LaMelo Ball as an international star coming in and be their starting point guard. So if I'm Philadelphia, I'm still looking in that wheelhouse. And to be honest with you, I really do think that the best two options for Philadelphia is to either hold or revisit and or hold conversations with the Cleveland Cavaliers, where you get the rights to Colin Sexton, as well as the rights to Kevin Love, because Kevin Love's contract will be a desirable expiring contract at the trade deadline next this coming season. I also think that when you look at the Sacramento Kings, I know that Philadelphia and the Kings have been in constant talk. I know that Buddy Hield is the flavor of the month as it relates to Lakers talk, but I also know that De'Aaron Fox was a point of contention. Philadelphia was not looking to make a trade with the Sacramento Kings unless De'Aaron Fox, point guard for the Sacramento Kings, was involved. And then you look at stuff that I said about Ben Simmons back in like June about the Portland Trailblazers. Is CJ McCollum somebody that the Sixers would be interested in? I think, honestly, a team that is very not much talked about is the Denver Nuggets, particularly as it relates to Michael Porter Jr., who is a rising star, in my opinion. And I think that just like when you look at the trade that the Lakers and the Wizards will ultimately make, moving Kyle Kuzma, I believe that Kuzma is going to flourish in Washington in the same way that Michael Porter Jr. could if he were moved to Philadelphia for Ben Simmons.
Now, first of all, you mentioned a lot of names there. So I'm not going to go name by name here because I don't want to waste anybody's time. But what I am going to say is I want to know from you, because you mentioned a lot of names, but are those names good enough? Like, are those guys, because, for example, the speculation out there, and I call it speculation on purpose, is the Sixers want a certain level of player or a certain level of return for Ben Simmons. And my theory is, well, if you ask for the most expensive thing and then somebody gives you right below that, well, then you got the market to move up closer to where you are. It's like you go to a car dealership, you never accept the first offer. You keep taking offers until you land on an offer that makes more sense for you.
I'll tell you, like my mother would always tell me, people in hell want ice water.
Right.
I say that to say this. I think Ben Simmons is the hottest that he's ever been right now. So, yes, I do agree with you that now is the time to make that move. But I also do know from leak sources that Ben Simmons was also a Houston Rocket. And from everything that I know, was shipped and told he was going. And then in the 25th hour, and of course, this was the James Harden deal. I think the James Harden situation is quite similar to this situation in that the more and more this drags on, the less you may get. And I know that, Houston was price gouging Philly as it related to the rights to not just Ben Simmons, but Tyrese Maxey, Matisse Thybulle, and multiple picks. And so I think that as much as Philly is downplaying how much they want to rid themselves of Simmons. And again, going back to my reporting last offseason, Ben Simmons has wanted out since last year, and now you're seeing in real time that not only are the Sixers actively trying to move him, but Ben Simmons' agent and Rich Paul is also helping make calls in the same way that he was helping the Lakers in the ultimate acquisition of Anthony Davis, which I also reported. And so when I look at the situation with Ben Simmons, I think, again, now is the time to do it. I still do think that when you look at the Toronto Raptors, for one, Pascal Siakam is somebody that I think would make a lot of sense in Philadelphia defensively from the perspective of a ball handler, particularly because if you lose Ben Simmons, you need a scorer. And I think that not only is Pascal Siakam a good investment, I think that they should revisit those conversations with the Golden State Warriors, because I do think that James Wiseman is going to be a stud in this league for a little while. And to have a twin tower, so to speak, with potentially Wiseman next to Joel Embiid, I think that would be pretty astounding. This could be Duncan Robinson Part 2. When I look at Michael Porter Jr., again, Denver has so much firepower on their roster. I think that's a drop in the bucket if they were to move him for Ben Simmons. I actually think that Denver would get the better end of the deal. But ultimately, it goes down to what Elton Brand and Daryl Morey want to ultimately do. Love them both. love to the family. But yeah, man, I think ultimately Philly should make the move now, and they should strike while the iron's hot. I just can't give you a confirmation as to whether I think it'll happen tonight, because there's a lot that happens on days like today.
That's why I say, should it happen? I'm not asking you, should. Because that way, if it doesn't happen, we can just rip them tomorrow. We all can just feel like, listen, man, you should have made the trade because you could have had X, Y, Z. We can all say that tomorrow. That's the way we set it up.
I've heard reporters say 48 hours. I just see a lot of times things happen and then people pull the trigger. And you kind of saw what happened with the Boston Celtics and Danny Ainge, where it's like Indian giver, so to speak. I don't know if that's an apropos term, but more lines, you can have it, but then you can't.
Right.
And it's just it's very messy. But I think now is the time to strike if you're trying to move Ben Simmons in your Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, well, the quarterback coach for Deshaun Watson, Quincy Avery, said that Deshaun Watson would be traded by Sunday. Well, he's still in Houston, so we'll just People say stuff sometimes. By the way, for those who are too young to know, the Duncan Robinson reference was not the Miami Heat guard. That was Tim Duncan and David Robinson.
Yeah, you're right there. Yes, sir.
There's probably somebody listening right there and be like, why are you referencing the Miami Heat shooting guard? Brandon Scoop B. Robinson joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN NBA Insider. Check out all of his work over at Bally Sports, at Scoop B on Twitter and Instagram. All right, before I let you go, a couple quick hits on the NBA draft, by the way, which is tonight. What is your favorite story of the draft? What is your favorite player story, whatever it may be? Because I feel like there's a lot of storylines coming into this draft. Most people know who Cade Cunningham is or Jalen Green, right? But there's other players in this draft because we know Giannis was not a top 10 pick and Jimmy Butler was not a top 20 pick. There's a lot of players in this league who are pretty darn good, like Klay Thompson, who were not even drafted in the top 10. So who is a player or a storyline that gets you interested or excited?
I want you to pay attention to, I'm a visiting professor at Ohio University. From time to time, I fly out there and I lecture to kids. There's a kid named Jason Preston, who many people in Ohio believe that he's exciting, from a guy that had 2 D1 offers out of prep school. He went to prep school in Tennessee. And I like his story just because in my visits to that campus, they were talking about this guy like he was King Tut himself. Ohio University is a smaller school, and I want to give love to those smaller D1 schools. I went to a smaller D1 school for grad school at Hofstra University. So he's somebody that I'm paying attention to. But to be honest with you, I've paid little attention to the draft because I'm just coming out of the finals and the playoffs. But in my coverage of just the first 5 picks or so, I know the Pistons think the world of Cade Cunningham. I sat down with Isaiah Thomas, NBA Hall of Famer, and he talked about Cade Cunningham as well as Rashad Phillips. He's at a multitude of different networks. But the thing that I get from both of them is, what player is Cade Cunningham going to be like? Isaiah says he sees the comparison between LeBron, Ben Simmons, and James Harden. And then Rashad said he sees the similarity with Grant Hill, which is kind of apropos because Grant Hill was a Piston. He was drafted in '95 and I think it's interesting. And I remember talking to Grant Hill a couple of years ago, and I asked him if he saw any comparison between he and LeBron James. And he said, I do see it, particularly being 6'8", distributing small forward and with a point guard's mind. I'm interested to see what Cade does in Detroit, a rebuilding process with Grant and Mason Plumlee and others. I'm excited to see what he'll do in Detroit, and I hope that he stays there at number 1.
Well, in this point in time, it's much better to be compared to Grant Hill than Ben Simmons in today's world, the way things are going. No, I'm not trying to throw Ben on the bus, but I'm just saying perception is reality sometimes, and people take certain things, take it a little too far. Before I let you go, now you are very snazzily dressed. For those who are listening on the radio, you have I believe that's a maroon jacket.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if you've seen this yet. I'm going to pop it on the screen for everybody watching on the stream. So this guy is at the draft tonight, all right? And Cam Thomas. This inside of his jacket is pretty darn impressive. Let me pop it on the screen here for everybody to see. For those on the radio, he has a Mamba mentality design on the inside of his jacket.
I like
I mean, this is absolute fire, this man's jacket at the draft. So I found somebody who is literally outdoing you in the fashion department today.
Hey man, it's fashion is very subjective. He probably had a bigger budget than I had, but what I will tell you while I have you on the line is I dropped a Q&A with a guy by the name of Clarence Jones of CJ Custom Clothiers based in Memphis. He's designed shirts for Shaq. He's made suits for the Kings of Comedy and Cedric the Entertainer, Steve Harvey, D.L. Hughley, and more. We sat down today and we talked about the process. He's actually working with Chris Duarte, who is a top pick in the draft this evening. And he's made suits for everybody. He's been in business for 20 to 30 years. And one of the things that he shared with me in our Q&A that you can find at ballysports.com, he mentioned just the linings of jackets. And so he said that that's going to be a growing trend. It's been a trend since about 2014, 2015. It gets more and more creative all the time. These guys get crazy budgets to do that. And I think it's ingenious that he has a Lakers tribute. What a good entrance to the NBA to tribute the Black Mamba of Lower Merion High School zone, Kobe Bean Bryant. So I think it's great.
Who also won the All-Star Game MVP in Philadelphia as well, did Kobe Bryant.
There you go.
Brandon Scoopy Robinson, NBA Insider. Follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Scoopy for the full NBA and culture experience only you can get from Brandon Scoopy Robinson. And again, he had Russell Westbrook to the Lakers, what was it, July 3rd, July 2nd?
If we're being honest with you, I got that call the same day that Damian Lillard said that he wanted Jason Kidd to be the coach of the Portland Trail Blazers. I just held it for a little while. So that was about May,
Well,
June.
if that's the case, you held it for a week.
I did, but I was on television on MSG networks in New York City, and they asked me my thoughts on the Lakers in the future. And you got to pick and choose when you say certain things. But yes, he will be a Los Angeles Laker alongside LeBron and Anthony Davis.
Well, I appreciate that you pick and choose to join me here on 97.3 ESPN. My friend, I appreciate you. Enjoy the fiasco that is known as the draft tonight, and we'll be catching up soon.
Brother, thank you for the opportunity to be myself. I'll talk to you soon.